Hi, and welcome to Voices from Acudemy. I am Shameem Saidoo, your host, and with me, Yousouf Neetoo. For this edition of Voices from Acudemy, we are pleased to welcome Goher, one of our collaborators. Hi, Goher. Happy to have you with us today.
Hi, Shameem. Nice to meet you. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. How about you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. The sun's out, so no complaints, really.
Yeah. As previously announced, each session will be covering topics in relation to adult education. For our podcast today, we will be diving into cybersecurity. So, what will be the best way to introduce Goher Mohammad to our listeners?
For me, I'd probably say someone who loves technology, is a complete technology geek. If I'm not doing some form of technology or working with some gadgets, I'd probably be doing it at home anyway. So pretty much I love the world that we live in terms of gadgets, technology, and just all things digital, really.
Hey Goher, how you doing?
Hey, Yousouf, how's it going?
Yeah, very well, thanks. How did you get into gadgets though? What made you get into your gadgets?
I think I grew up in that age where it was on the kind of verge of starting to become useful. So you guys may or may not remember Space Invaders and Pac-Man and all of that. That was my generation. So when I was, probably 4 or 5 years old, that's what my dad was playing, and I got into it, and I was playing those types of games. And I think ever since then, and then it was the console era and Commodore 64 and Commodore Amiga and all of these Super Nintendo. That was my generation. And I think it was just, you could see the improvement with each generation, each version of that. And I don't know, it was just exciting, really. It was a cool time.
So, Goher, what has been your boss experience and what do you do in life, your current role?
So currently I'm head of information security at L&Q Group. So L&Q Group is a housing association, but we've got a fantastic technology team and set up about 120 people. We do some really exciting technology within modern workplace, and you name it, we're doing it. So that's where I am at the moment. I didn't start off in security, so my actual background is working in technologies from more of a networking and support standpoint. So I started off doing first and second line support at Citibank many moons ago, in 2001. And that was my first role in IT. It was it was help desk, supporting staff, about 500 people at Citibank. And it was a really good introduction for me, really good experience in getting real understanding what technology involves, what kind of base level support, really hands-on. This was the time of big back CRT monitors, and those things would weigh an absolute ton. The 21-inch monitors used to weigh about 35 kilos, and moving those around were a nightmare. But it was basically supporting end user, and I did that for about 2 years. I unfortunately was made redundant and ended up contracting after that for a media company, which was part of Omnicom Group, which is one of the big four when it comes to media. And I was there for about 6 months contracting for a small agency, and that contract finished up. But that same agency that I was supporting were looking for a full-time IT manager, and they approached me after that 6 months and asked if I'd be interested in taking that up. For me, it was a big step up, but a really fantastic opportunity, and it was a bit of a blessing, really. So I thought, why not, and ended up looking after their IT, their strategic, ended up being there for 13 years, which was an amazing journey because we grew. We got bigger and bigger. We started off only 30 people. We ended up becoming global, merging. I think in total, by the time I finished, I was part of a company that was about 1,200 strong. So it was a really, really good journey to be part of that and to really grow. After that, I decided to look for something new ventures, because it's important to evaluate where you are, and ended up at a fintech company for a small time, which was again really interesting. It was called Merrill Corporation. It was a really interesting company, not quite what I was looking for, but I was there for about 8 months as head of IT for Europe, and that ended up I ended up deciding to take a bit of a career break, as it wasn't quite the right role, and I was probably at that stage in my career after working in technology for probably 15 years. I felt like I needed to do something a bit different. So I decided to take a couple of months off to reevaluate where I am, what I wanted to do. And that's where my passion and drive towards security really started taking off. So I've done a lot of security stuff when I was at Omnicom Group. So we implemented Sarbanes-Oxley governance, which is, for those of you that are interested, have a look at it. It's a really interesting one. It came about as a result of Enron, when Enron folded overnight because of bad financial practices. And what they did, they put in a whole load of controls for anyone on the US stock market, which got me into security. And actually, it was really hard work, but it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed the whole getting good practices in place alongside all the technology that I was involved in. And so that took me from media to evaluating where I was, and I ended up contracting at Photobox for about 4.5 months as their head of risk and compliance, which was a really good role and really drove my passion, working with some fantastic people. That was an e-commerce company. Photobox also look after Moonpig. So Moonpig's a fairly big brand. A lot, everyone knows the jingle. And it was a fantastic opportunity to really see technology in kind of the here and now in that digital space. And it just, I've not really looked back since that. So that was in 2018, early 2018. And for me, that was just, I've never looked back in terms of my career in cybersecurity and information security. And I'm now where I am.
How long are you the current role as head of security?
So I've been there for coming up to 20 months, so coming up to 2 years, and essentially my remit is acting CISO. So while I don't report directly into the board, my role is heading up information security, owning that piece, and working with the directors to make sure that there's that visibility across the organization.
Excellent background in terms of your journey and career. 13 years in one role. Wow.
It was.
That's a long time.
It was, but what was interesting was, for me, I would evaluate where I am every 4 or 5 years. And each time that came about, the company was merging with another company, and there was this new challenge and opportunity. So actually, all the stuff I wanted to do outside of finance, outside of financial growth, actually I was getting in my current role. So it was just one of those things. Before you know, it's 13 years, right? So,
of course. As long as the role keeps you motivated and challenges, then why not stick with the one company?
Absolutely. I mean, that was, for me, it was more about the opportunity and challenge and growth. And that's why that transpired. And it was a really great journey. And I really, really enjoyed that whole time I was there.
Goher, can you give us an overall description of cybersecurity, and maybe how are we all involved with it in our daily lives?
Absolutely. So information and cybersecurity is a really interesting topic. And it's something that started becoming even more apparent. I think the biggest driver for information and cybersecurity has been the GDPR regulation that's taken effect. That's really made it, vitally important, even though it was important before, it's even more important now. And I don't like using the word cyber, because cyber is a bit of a slang. It's a bit of a catch-all term to essentially cover digital, anything that lives in the digital world, something that's not physically tangible. Although with information security, you cover physical as well, and that's why cybersecurity it's an interesting word. But information security as a whole, it's really about protecting your digital assets and your information. And this is something that we've been touching for many, many, many years, whether it's in our personal lives, whether it's in our work lives. It's all about protecting sensitive and confidential information. And the world we live in now is all digital. So before we protect, important documents in a filing cabinet, we're now protecting them on file servers or on our cloud, or we're protecting them on our laptops or our hard drives. And essentially, that information is important to someone. And it's moving away from this. It's moving away from this kind of, actually, you know what, that's not that important. That information is not that important, to actually that information is important to someone because someone else can sell it. And because someone else can sell it, it means they want to get access to it. And if they want to get access to it, how are they going to use it? And it's really about protecting those real important bits of information and making sure they don't fall into the wrong hands. So whenever we're downloading apps on our phones, we're giving away bits of information. We're in this barter environment at the moment. So there's always a trade-off. You have to give something to get something. So we're transacting information all the time without even knowing it. So on our mobile phones, when we download an app, it asks you for certain access to your phone because it needs information to be able to give you that value. And that's the bit that we miss generally. We do it because it's part of what we do. And it's how do we protect that? How do we make sure we're only giving away the stuff that we want to, as opposed to giving away everything that we're not comfortable giving away? So your address or your phone number or your bank card details or your family details, all of this is critical information. And a bad actor, someone who wants to do bad things, will find that information useful to either to impersonate you, to sell on your information, sometimes for legitimate reasons, sometimes for bad reasons. But the idea is, information cybersecurity is really important because we should be doing our very best to protect the stuff that we don't want other people to have access to. And, there's such a big plethora of open source information that you can get from LinkedIn, that you can get from Facebook. It's quite scary how much information you can get to know about someone without them giving it away to you. And it's really about protecting that.
What are the threats you would say that businesses face in relation to information security?
So this is a big topic. There's so much, but very high level, the things that we see cropping up all the time are phishing. So where bad email links are sent to people, or even via text on phones now, and they point you to a bad place. So we've all seen the click on this link and you'll get £100 vouchers to buy as much Nando's as you want, things like that. We see these going around all the time. And a lot of the time, these are phishing links. And it's really about protecting that, not preventing that, because that's where you leak your credentials. That's where you give away your passwords, you give your email addresses to someone who wants to do those spoofing. I think the other really interesting one is social engineering. And social engineering is a term that you hear often, but not everyone fully understands. And with social engineering, it's really about how can someone manipulate you to get information or manipulate a system. So social engineering can be as simple as someone phoning you up and pretending to be from a organization from HMRC and saying, oh, we've got your details. They'll pull some information they found online and they'll ask you for card details or as much as they can so they can use that to sell on or to use it to carry out some kind of fraud. And that's a big one we see a lot. People sending in fake invoices from a spoofed account or a hacked email account are demanding payment, and because it's coming from someone who looks legitimate, people often are drawn towards that, and you have that kind of social scaring tactics. Oh, if you don't do this, then you'll be fined. If you don't carry out this action, then these are the consequences. Or, it's all playing on psychology, and I think that's a really important one that we see a lot of threats. Bad practice is another one. So just doing simple things in a bad way, not getting your basics right. So when we see updates on our phone or the laptops or on a work environment, making sure they're up to date is really important. Following good advice like having good passwords and not sharing them, getting those basics are really important as well, and they're big threats to businesses. And then you've got the, and I use this word, quote unquote, hackers. So they're basically bad people, or they're people that want to do bad things, whether it's to a business or to you individually. And that's essentially, if you take away the word hackers, they're essentially criminals in the physical world. They just want to do bad things, and they want to manipulate the system, or take advantage of weaknesses. And they're opportunists, and they will take advantage of your information. And it's really, how do we protect that? So they're the threats. I would say high level, there's hundreds more, which I can talk to you about for hours, but they're the ones that are we see regularly.
My next obvious question will be, how can businesses or individuals minimize those risks?
That's a great question, and that's part of my biggest challenge. But no, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind, and one of those things is visibility. Having visibility across what they call your threat landscape, essentially being able to see what's going on, how it's going on, being able to map that out in a way that you know where your weak points are. So there's quite a cliched term, and I quite like using it anyway. You are as strong as your weakest link. And there's nothing more true with information and cybersecurity. If your weakest link is an open username and password that's available to the whole world, and that someone can get access to your system, then that's your biggest risk, because then that can be used to traverse all the harder things to get at. It's like leaving your front door open in your house. You can lock, you can put locks all around your house for certain things, but if you leave your front door open, anyone can walk in. But I think the main thing is visibility. And the way you get visibility is through a number of things. One is through risk management and having a risk register. So a lot of companies have risk registers, but actually, do they proactively do anything about those risks that they capture? And risks are essentially things that may transpire, and you base it on factual information. These are all examples of risks, and then it's how you manage them, making good decisions on that. So that's really, really important. And there's lots of really good risk management material out there that can give you information. There's loads of methodologies. NIST do it. ISO have risk management as well. These are all really, really useful sources, but it tells you about what risks are and how you manage them. I'd also say getting the fundamentals right is really important. If you've got your fundamentals right, then you really reduce the risk rather than letting things transpire, and then you're working on the back foot. And then I think the other thing is just making sure that you have a focus on risk and information and cybersecurity risk. So it's really technology risk, and making sure you focus on it, but you also invest in remediating those. A lot of good people in organizations will always make good decisions, but they can't do that because they don't really know what the landscape looks like, or they have visibility. So they can't invest and put focus on these areas because they don't know it exists. And it's really about making sure that they are visible. So it goes back to that visibility piece.
Goher, question. Is there Do you think there's enough awareness about these sort of threats? Are people in the industry or companies, are they well educated in terms of how to handle these or minimize the risk?
Yes and no. So I'm gonna cop out with that answer by saying yes and no. I think there is definitely improvement happening, but it's a known fact that there's high demand and low supply when it comes to information security and cybersecurity. There's a lot of companies that are investing because they appreciate, as we're moving in this modern world, everything's integrating quicker, faster. Companies need to move at pace, and there's some gaps in companies. People want to invest for sure, but also when they're investing, it's about getting the right people and value, because it's not about this is a problem, we need to fix it. It's about this is an area of risk. Do we accept that risk? Because with any kind of risk, you've also got opportunities from that. So you might invest in a small company, which is a startup, which has some risks because it may not last very long, but also what they may offer you is going to give, accelerate your business and grow your business by, 500%. So there's also opportunity. But having those facts there is really important. And I don't think a lot of companies have all the facts across the organization, especially when it comes to technology, to make good decisions. But if they know those facts, they will make the right decisions and they will invest in the right place. And I think it's about getting that focus and awareness. A lot of it is, you're absolutely right, Yousouf, making sure that people understand what it means, and that only comes through awareness and understanding of what the risks are. So, a cyber attack can cost it can cost the whole business if it's bad enough. If it brings the business to its knees for a week, where there's no revenue coming in, and they're a trader, they won't exist. So it's critical.
Yeah, I totally agree, because what you see now, you hear it more in the mainstream news. And especially the bigger companies are getting under attack by these sort of threats. But I still feel like management and senior managers and leaders and the CEOs of these worlds, they probably still don't really know what these threats are, and it then trickles down to their workforce. So it's about building that awareness. I truly believe, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's top down and it's bottom up. It's both. It has to work on all levels. And you're absolutely right. CEOs and those key stakeholders and board members, they don't have a full picture. And that's why you have a CISO role and you have a CIO role. But a CISO role is more specific to that threat. And you have your kind of information security functions, which are there to drive that. And that's really, really important. And it's becoming more and more integral to technology operations. It's no longer about just technology and it facilitating, laptops and servers and applications to allow the business to do its job. It's also actually a good information security function will actually support all aspects of the business to make better decisions. It will help it make better decisions. It's not just about protecting, it's also about enabling, and it's also about scaling. And they're really critical elements of a good information and cybersecurity function. So it's not just the old governance practice where we're going to enforce policies and processes and make people's lives hard and bureaucratic. It's actually about making security invisible, so you're protecting the business. It's not about making people's life hard, but actually easier so they can do their jobs.
Let us now talk about the current pandemic. Would you say, Goher, that the COVID-19 situation had an impact on increased information security risk, I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So the the pandemic has changed everything, and I use that. It's a bit cliche to say pandemics change the way we work, we're going to a new norm, but actually the reality is it changes everything, but also it's a great opportunity. Because with every opportunity that you have the option to use it or ignore it. Now, the opportunity and the risk is that the opportunity is it allows people to be more flexible, be more agile in the way they work. So companies have been saying we're agile, we work in an agile way. But the reality is they're not agile and they don't work in an agile way. It's just a terminology to entice people. Agile means working from wherever you need to work from in order to deliver your objectives, to enable the business. That's what agile means. And the pandemic really has pushed companies to say, well, are you actually agile? So, and with agility, you have an increase in risk, because where you had people who were working in a secure office where you'd have access control for employees with their badges to get into a building, you've now got people working at home. You've got people working in a shared home, which is, if people live in a flat share, you've got flatmates you live with. Are they cyber criminals? Are they not? We don't know. We're not going to speculate. But if you leave that laptop open and you've got financial information about your business there, is someone wanting to do something? That's an environment you can't control. There's obviously those controls that happen in an office, but there's a higher risk in that. You'd also have people working outside in a cafe when that becomes normal again. That's always a risk as well. The home network environment is also particularly at risk because you can't govern that. You can't put in good security practices in someone's personal home environment. And this is where it gets interesting, because if you start thinking like a hacker, and then in this industry, you have to think like a hacker, what you've got is, if someone's home network, if I'm working at home, I've got other things plugged into my network, my Wi-Fi. So if I'm working from home, my laptop's secure because my company's given it to me. But actually, I might have plugged in something else. For example, I bought an IoT device from, made by a company in North Korea. And I'm not absolutely saying that North Korea is bad or anything like that. But if they haven't got the same practices, if they haven't got the same security practices, if they're providing a gadget which has got bad code, which is going to pull data and move it to North Korea, because as a country they want visibility on everything that their companies do. If it's pulling my information from there, it may also do that for my laptop, for example, or anything else I do on my home network. And there's some really interesting articles and YouTube videos just talking about how things can get hacked in a home environment. So that's the risk now we live in. And it's about how do we reduce that? But the pandemic has highlighted these risks, that where people are maybe in an organization, maybe only 25% of the people working from home. Now you've got more people working from home.
Right, Goher. So obviously with the current pandemic that we've just been discussing, how do you see the landscape changing for companies, in the sense of, are we going to see more working from home or more agile working? What's your feeling on this?
Absolutely. It changes, as I was saying earlier, it changes everything. What's now going to happen, it has to happen, is businesses need to understand they need to be more resilient when it comes to these types of issues. And a pandemic is one example of many examples where the ability to work remotely gives you such an edge as an organization. If you can mobilize your workforce to work from wherever they need to work from, you are no longer limited by environmental factors. So if an area of London is shut down, if there is a terror threat, for example, or if a building burns down, or if a building's unavailable, these are all things that have been looked at by information and cybersecurity for years, but never really get much investment or thought. A lot of it is because of regulation, but how often those transpire doesn't, if someone's lived for it, they will invest in it. If someone hasn't lived for it, they won't. All of a sudden now, everyone's had to live through this change, and now it's about how do we make sure we can do the job. And working in an agile way is always about reaching objectives. It's not about how many hours a day you spend on that. It's about agreeing. It's an agreement between the company and its leadership and its managers and its employees on making sure they achieve those goals. And it can come about through that. All of a sudden, I think people also, work-life balance has become really important, and having that good work-life balance. Now, some people like working in the evenings. Some people like working during the day. Some people like to work as they need to. And these are all factors now that come into play. I mean, for example, from personal experience and from my team, the way I've set up my team is that we were always set up to be able to work from anywhere in an agile way. So actually us moving to pandemic mode, actually when we went full-time working from home, it was just an adjustment for us to be at home all the time rather than, we can't do our jobs. And that's been a really good exercise for us and super valuable, because if I hadn't set that up, that might have been more of a challenge. Going forward, I think companies and non kind of frontline workers will be working, I would say, probably a minimum 2 to 3 days a week. And then you've got the business footprint as well. So do businesses need offices that hold 1,000 people, or does that office capacity become a agile workspace now, whereas they've been talking about it or they weren't interested in it? Does it become a space where people can come in and meet with their teams, but then work over Teams or Zoom or Skype or WebEx or whatever it is to do their jobs? It's a really, really, I think for me, and I think as a whole, I think it's where we've been able to work like this for almost 15 years, where you've had VPN connections and dial-up and all of this. You could do your job from home. And a lot of it's been business practices and resistance that's prevented that from happening because of change. And this almost is now the proof that this can happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it also shows that management has had essentially no choice but to adapt and change. And surely this will continue, because this will be like proof that this has essentially worked during this period.
Yeah, and it also means that, you don't have that culture of your boss looking over your shoulder and vice versa, or you having to report into your boss. If that's agreed, then that's what you're measured on. As an employee, as an employer, you measure your staff on the output and performance, not on how many hours a day they spend working, which is, and you see it all the time. You see people that will go in at 9 o'clock on the dot, and then they're waiting literally for 5 o'clock to hit, and then they're out the door. Or 4:59, exactly. Right? You see that all the time. It's such a common thing, and everyone works differently. But actually, for me, you're not getting, you're not getting full productivity either from the employee, or you're not getting the right output, and that needs to be adjusted, not the time that they work.
Yeah, I agree. So the management style plays a key role.
Absolutely, 100%.
If one was looking for a career in information security, what sort of training or certification will they be requiring?
So that's a really good question. And there's a lot of training out there in cybersecurity. I think one of the biggest challenges in information and cybersecurity training is there is no de facto course, but there's lots of really good courses out there that can really help you progress in your career. So you've got things like CEH, which is Certified Ethical Hacker. And that is a course that teaches you how to think and act like a hacker. But ethical hacking is a really interesting field. And I think it's probably one of the most interesting fields in security, where you can hack, but you're doing it for good, because you're trying to find out the weak points. So you're testing the weak points, and by testing the weak points, you can then secure those weak points. But you look at your kind of your strategic thinking is different, and it really helps a business understand what is really important, what needs to be focused on. You've got CISM, which is another great certification. You've got CISSP, there's CompTIA, Security Plus. There's loads out there. But I think for me, before diving into different certifications, it's really important that anyone who's looking to get into this space, and I've done the talks about this, it's about having the right mindset, and it's about having the right application and thinking. It's not about previous knowledge. It's not about having a deep dive technical understanding. Some of the best security people I've met have just had really great mindsets, and they've got the training thereafter, or they've done the training as they've progressed their career. Because with security, there's so many different aspects of it. So you've got forensic investigation and deep dive, which is about understanding facts based on an incident that's taken place. And that's really about your inquisitive nature and going that little bit extra because you're intrigued by it, not, without using the terminology too specifically. I don't want people to turn into nosy neighbors, but the nosy neighbor analogy is great, because if you're a nosy neighbor, you want to know a little bit more. You want to know what's going on. But then actually it's the forensics becomes the deep dive. You're not just being nosy, you start interrogating, you start researching, you start looking into systems, you start problem solving to get to it. You're almost doing detective work, is probably another way of putting it, which is quite nice. So that's one element of it. I think the other element is, you've got the governance, which is making sure you've got good frameworks and policies in place, just making sure that you've got guidelines that people can look to and say, okay, because, it's like an instruction manual. So when we do stuff, sometimes we need guidance, we need an instruction manual to look through. Whether some of us read it or not is a different matter, and that's just the way people are, right? But you still need to formulate those good guidelines so people have a structure to follow. If you don't have guidelines, then people do whatever they want. So, the current pandemic response from the government has been, they put guidelines in place, they put processes in place to try and reduce those risks. We can argue all day long whether they were right or wrong, but the point is they put guidelines in place to follow. So that's another area. Then you've got your secure architecture, the real technical hands-on. So people that are going to be implementing good security practices within technology. So whether it's patching computers or whether it's making sure code is good on applications that are built by developers. These are all aspects that are elements of information and cybersecurity, and it all comes down to where your passion and interest is, and it's really about doing the right thing. You by nature, it's really important to have the mindset that you want to do the right thing. You want to protect the hand that feeds you, as if you're working for an organization, or you want to protect your information and the things that are important to you in the digital space. And I think it's that, getting into security, having a career in cybersecurity and information security really starts off with those basics, wanting to do the right thing, having that inquisitive nature, having a good mindset, being proactive, and it's not about, I've been told to do this, so I'll do it. It's about, I've been told to do this, but I want to learn more myself. It's that passion that's driven from just being excited about the topic, but also it also means that you're waking up, you're bettering yourself without someone pushing you to better yourself. And I think that's really, really important.
Well, that's all for today's episode of Voices from Acudemy. Thank you for listening. Goher, it has been the pleasure for me and Yousouf to have you today.
No worries. Thank you for having me, Shameem. I hope, I hope it's been a good discussion.
Thanks, Goher.
Join us again on our next webcast when we will be discussing more about different fields of training. Make sure you do visit us at acudemy.com and sign in to our mailing list. Thank you from your hosts, Shameem and Yousouf. Cheers. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.